On today's Newsmakers, a miracle, misgendering, and CNN's end times debacle. That and more coming up. Welcome to Newsmakers, a show where we go behind the headlines each and every week to bring you interviews with pastors, entertainers, politicians, and other notable news figures. On today's Newsmakers, we're joined first by author and prophecy expert Todd Hampson. He joins us to respond to a strange new CNN analysis. It's an article that seemingly took aim at evangelical beliefs about Israel and the end times. Let's welcome Todd to the show. Well, Todd, there is a very interesting CNN article that essentially warns about what it called in one version of the headline a controversial form of Christianity that could be shaping what has been happening in the Middle East and Iran. Now, we're going to get into the ins and the outs of this article, but it's about prophecy. It's about Christians who believe in prophecy and the rapture. When you read this article, and we'll link out to it, so if people want to read it, they can, what was your reaction to it?
Yeah, I mean, it really, on so many levels, number one, it's not journalism. We'll talk about this a little bit, but there's no other opinions or voices. It really is just a hit piece on Christianity, trying to paint all Christians as, 100% behind Donald Trump, seeing him as the chosen one and seeing true biblical Christianity as the problem, not the solution. So it really is a very caricatured view of biblical Christianity on many levels. And I know we'll get into each one of those levels, but yeah, it definitely needs to be addressed because it's just not fair, not balanced, not accurate, and not journalism. Anybody can have an opinion, but it's not journalism at all. It's not reporting anything. It's simply stating an opinion and pushing it really hard.
Well, yeah, it felt like when I read the article, my first thought was, oh, this is kind of odd. Is this an opinion piece? And maybe CNN will come back and say that it is. It felt like an article that only consulted one side, and it would be a more progressive side, or a side that isn't necessarily progressive, but rejects the rapture, rejects certain elements of end times theology. It felt like there was even a section of the article that talked about the fear that the rapture instills in people, and this one woman was talking about how her friends growing up were panicked if the house got quiet because they thought everybody was raptured and they weren't. And I thought this is very interesting, but a lot of it then tied all of that to what is happening in the Middle East and U.S. policy in the Middle East. So we'll get into some of that, but the article mentioned, and I thought this was really interesting, that the word rapture isn't present in the Bible. And when that was mentioned, it felt like that was an attempt to say, well, the word's not even in the Bible, so how could you believe in it? How do you respond to that?
Yeah, that and a few of the other arguments that we'll get into really are just, those arguments have been blown out of the water so many times. They're not factual. They didn't do the research. Yes, technically the word rapture is not in the original Greek language, but the word harpazo is, which means a violent or quick snatching away, a removal from something. And it has other meanings. And that word is used several times in Scripture. And that word in the Latin was translated to rapturo. And then that's how we get the transliterated term rapture. So you don't have to call it rapture. You can call it the great snatching away, or the great harpazo. Sounds kind of like some kind of Italian dish. And now I'm getting hungry. But but it is in Scripture. That's the thing, is just a little bit of research from this, whoever wrote this article would have seen. Yes, rapture, the word is not in the original language, but neither are many words that we use that we've translated into our English language. So that's really one of the many straw man arguments in this article.
Well, and one of the other things that is interesting about this is there are a lot of other words that are actually, a number of other words that are central to the Christian faith, right? Your argument is that the concept of the rapture is present. People do theologically debate different elements of when the rapture happens. Some will say they think the second coming and the rapture are one and the same. That's a separate issue. What I want to address here, though, is that the word Trinity is not in the Bible. And that is something that is central to the Christian faith, is it not? So sometimes words are not there that we use today, but concepts are. I'll give you a chance to respond to that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the word Bible's not in the Bible. Like you said, the word Trinity is not in the Bible, but these are terms we've come to represent theological truths that are in the Bible. So that's a great point, Billy. Absolutely.
All right, my final question for you, and I want to get your reaction on this before we go, but this is how the article ends, and you read it so you know, but it says, many critics of Iran say it is a theocracy led by someone who reduces the world to a clash between good and evil, and whose foreign policy is driven by apocalyptic religious myths. What if America's clash with Iran is driven in part by some of the same religious forces? That When I read that, I thought, my goodness, wow, what a way to end this show. What was your thought in reading that?
Yeah. Now everyone come together and be happy, and let's be a nice unified country, right? Yeah. To me, that's just gaslighting at its best and ending it on a low point. And Jesus said in John 15, basically, don't be surprised when the world hates you, because they hated me first. The world, the culture we live in, is okay with an anemic, weak Christianity that is just keeps their faith private, doesn't impinge on anybody's beliefs or challenge anyone in what they claim and what they say. And that's kind of what we have here. Is they're saying those who really believe what the Bible says are the troublemakers. And we are, in one sense. God uses us to change the world, and that's happened over and over again. But we're living in a season right now, Billy, where Judeo-Christian thought is making a little bit of a comeback and having an impact on culture. And I think that's threatening to, looking at this from a spiritual perspective now, not the human perspective. It's threatening to the enemy. You're over the target when you're receiving fire. Okay, that's what all pilots would tell you in World War II or at times when they've had to fight wars. You're over the enemy when they start firing back. So the fact that there's this cultural pushback to biblical Christianity, which calls for nothing but unity, grace, forgiveness, love, protection. I mean, all great, good Judeo-Christian concepts that come straight out of Scripture and from our background. But the enemy is going to do his best to try to twist that. And unfortunately, people who write articles like this that obviously have a bent, a mindset, a worldview that they want to push, want to paint all Christians as the same. They want to put us all in a cookie cutter box, and they want to paint Christians as the problem, not the solution. So I think that's how, sadly, that's how this article ends.
I appreciate you taking the time, breaking this all down, as always, with us today.
Hey, it's my pleasure, Billy. I'm always glad to join you. And these are important issues of the day. So I think it's great to be able to talk about them. And people are interested to have answers and counter arguments and kind of understand more holistically the approach of what's going on and why people are saying such things and how we as believers should respond to them in a biblical way. So thank you for the opportunity to join you. It's always a pleasure.
Todd offers us a great deal to think about on these important topics. We'll be right back in just a moment with more Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. Next up, a 20-year-old Florida man named Aiden Perry is crediting God and a cross necklace for helping save his life after he was accidentally shot. Let's welcome him here to Newsmakers to share the incredible miracle story. Aiden, appreciate you taking the time and coming on with us today. You have an incredible story, a crazy story of survival. The fact that you're even sitting here right now, I think, is miraculous. But let's sort of go back a couple of weeks. You were with a friend, a gun went off, you were shot. Take us through what happened.
Yeah, I went over to a friend's house to catch up. Hadn't seen him in about a year. I went over, there was guns out. I didn't feel comfortable myself. Probably would have never been there if there was. If I had known there was guns there. But I go in, he gives me a quick tour of his place. It's a new place. I wasn't even there for 5 minutes. I walk back in the kitchen and he's got the gun in his hand. I'm asking if the safety's on the gun. They kind of joke around with it, kind of saying I'm scared. And then I kind of back away a little bit, and he aims the gun at me and he pulls the trigger. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so the trigger is pulled. I know it's probably hard to think about what was going through your mind in those moments. You said you were nervous. You were sort of letting that be known. Do you remember what you were thinking in that specific moment when the gun deployed?
Oh my gosh, so many things. From am I gonna die? I need to see my family. Of course, the main thing was getting me somewhere that I can get taken care of. Just thinking, God, please don't let me die. It was insane.
I mean, so, and this was an accident, obviously. It sounds like this was an accident. Would that be a correct assumption?
Yes, he didn't have the intent in his head to kill me or shoot me. He didn't have the intent to shoot me.
So, okay, so you end up going to the hospital. Now, the thing about this that is catching everybody's eye is you, I believe at Christmas time by your dad, were given this cross that you were wearing at the time. Now, this cross, I mean, anybody who's worn a necklaces move around, right? So the idea that this necklace would have been positioned in the exact place where the bullet hit shocked me, because the necklace essentially saved your life. Talk a little bit about that.
It's crazy to think about, truly, now that it's been 3 weeks, and just rethinking everything. The cross, I don't know exactly where it was on my chest. It must have been exactly where the bullet, entered and ricocheted. Maybe not. Nobody really knows. But I believe it was more than just a piece of metal. I believe that I was protected. Truly.
Yeah. When I hear stories like yours, I often think, gosh, what plan does God have for that person's life? Right. Because clearly, and the skeptics are going to say, oh, well, the cross just happened to be there. It's all by chance. But when you look at this, even the doctors, it sounds like, were pretty mesmerized by the metal. When they talked about the metal, and of course, I love what you said before, too. It's more than just the metal. You feel like God protected you, but that this cross may have been used as sort of a shield to stop the bullet from going directly into the cavity around your lungs or even hitting your heart. When you reflect on that word miracle, would you say you believe this is 100% a miracle?
This is 100% a miracle. The doctors at HCA, they said it's a miracle that this didn't do what it should have done. My doctor, Tanko, at my ortho surgeon, he said he calls me his miracle patient. He's a believer. He's a firm believer. And he says that, I was definitely protected, being watched over.
How will this change? You talked about your life, before. Obviously, I assume, you grew up in a Christian home, or you had belief in God in some way. You now have this happen. You feel that there's this purpose. How will that change how you live your life moving forward?
Ooh, that's a good question. God will definitely be a big part of my life moving forward. And I want to say that he already was. But as far as the continuous, praying and actually, walking in that Christian life, that Christian-centered life, is going to be a little bit more serious in a way. Yeah. That's a good question.
Well, how has your family reacted to this? Just the people closest to you watching this happen, knowing the details, knowing how close you came very literally to dying.
Oh, it's been a very emotional thing that's happened. My father's been really, really going through it emotionally, but also very thankful. Everybody's so thankful and grateful that God stepped in and did what he does. Because honestly, I shouldn't, I don't want to say I shouldn't be here right now talking to you, but I believe that without God, I wouldn't be.
Aiden, I appreciate you taking the time, sharing with us. And as the story develops, new pieces of the puzzle come out. Would love to have you back to share more. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Be sure to continue praying for Aiden as he heals and recovers. We'll be right back in just a moment with more Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers on the CBN News Channel. For our final segment, we are chatting with Stephanie Taub. She's an attorney with First Liberty Institute, and she's here to break down one of her clients' battles. It's an interesting fight reportedly being waged after this individual was purportedly fired for misgendering a fellow employee. Let's welcome her here to Newsmakers to break it all down. I appreciate you taking the time today. Now, First Liberty Institute filed a charge of discrimination with the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission against Bath and Body Works. This is a really interesting case. Take us through what happened that led to that filing.
Absolutely. So at First Liberty, we represent Joselyn Bowden. She was a store manager for over 3 years at a Utah branch of Bath and Body Works. And when a transgender employee started working at her store, after just one shift, Joselyn treated her well, treated her like everyone else, was willing to use names or nicknames. But the only problem is she could not use pronouns in a way that was inconsistent with her religious and moral beliefs. And because of that, there was an HR complaint that was filed, and she was immediately investigated and fired.
So this individual was hired, I believe, in April, and the firing happened by May. So it was relatively quick. That's accurate, right? That timeline?
That's right. So this only happened a few months ago.
What was the official reason that Joselyn was given for her firing?
It was a violation of their policies, accusing her of discrimination because of the pronoun issue.
So she came to a place where she was willing to use the preferred name of the person, right? You may change your name if you identify as transgender to something else, but not use the non-biological pronouns, just to recap. So she was willing to use the name, but not the pronouns.
That's right.
So, this is an interesting situation. What is the policy, and I'm sure you would know this at this point, of Bath and Body Works when it comes to the pronoun issue? Do they have an official one?
Well, what they did is they didn't have any sort of interactive process. There was no process for figuring out how to accommodate Joselyn. It was you have to use these pronouns or you're going to be fired. And when it was clear that she could not use these because of her religious and moral beliefs, they just terminated her. So that was their policy. And we strongly believe that this violates both state and federal law, and that's why we filed our EEOC charge.
So what should the store have done from your perspective in this case in handling it? Because these situations are happening all of the time. This is just one example of them. And even if Bath and Body Works does have a policy that is very stringent, it still opens up the question of, well, if you have a religious perspective, should you get an exemption, right? So what should have happened from your perspective in this case?
Right. Bath and Body Works should have found a way to respect all of its employees and to figure out a way to live up to its ideals of inclusivity and tolerance. So a simple solution would have simply been to allow Joselyn to use names instead of pronouns, or even allow her to use names consistent with her religious beliefs, or pronouns consistent with her religious beliefs. So the legal standard here is employers are required to provide religious accommodations unless they meet a very narrow exception. So unless they can show that granting that accommodation would cause undue hardship, which is defined as substantial increased costs to the company. And so allowing her to use names instead of pronouns wouldn't cause substantial increased costs. So therefore, that's what employers should do.
So when we look at a case like this, from your perspective, you obviously have federal law and you have state law, and every state is different in how they handle these issues. What do you believe was violated statewide versus, federal? What laws do you believe may have been violated in this case?
Yeah, that's an important question. You're right. Every state is different. In Utah, there's actually a very helpful law that provides protections for religious and moral expression. unless there's certain narrow exceptions that are met. So essentially, if it's not disruptive, not harassing your other employees, then you're able to freely engage in religious or moral expression and can't be fired because of that.
So can you just, before we go, explain, how this has affected Joselyn? Because you obviously, she had a job, she's working, she's managing this store, she's terminated. There are emotional, there are also practical, I would imagine, implications for what that has meant for her life. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it really upends your expectations. All of a sudden, you don't have your livelihood that you're depending on. And it's only been a couple of months so far, but she's had to explain to friends and family that she's willing to take this stand because she couldn't violate her principles. And she had to choose between her faith and her job, and she made the choice to choose her faith and to stay true to that. She mentioned the other day that she would encourage other people to stand up for their convictions, and that things will sort themselves out if they just have faith in that.
Well, I appreciate you breaking this down. We'll continue to cover this story. It is an important one. We're seeing more and more of these clashes between, policies at a company or an organization and in individuals, exercise of their religious liberty. And so there are a lot of different issues sort of floating around in these cases, but I appreciate you joining us to break it all down today.
Of course. Thank you for covering it.
We'll continue to cover that story as it unfolds, as we have new details, and we'll be right back in just a moment with more Newsmakers. That's all for Newsmakers. Thank you for watching, and be sure to head over to the CBN News YouTube channel. That's where you'll find the full interviews you saw on today's episode. Also, be sure to check out our new documentary investigating the supernatural miracles. We traveled across America documenting some of the most incredible miracle claims. You can watch that at cbn.com/supernatural. As for this show, we'll see you again next week.